Em 1976, something happened that was never supposed to be known, not leaked, not recorded, not remembered, not written in history, not spoken in public, not even acknowledged behind closed doors, not whispered, not hinted, not even questioned. A mission, launched in complete silence, no headlines, no countdown, no global audience watching the sky, no reporters waiting outside, no cameras tracking the launch, no witnesses counting the seconds, no trace, nothing, just a rocket, leaving Earth, quietly, almost invisibly, slipping through the atmosphere like it wasn't meant to be seen, like it wasn't meant to exist, carrying a secret so disturbing, so deeply unsettling, that it would be erased from history itself, not hidden, not classified, erased, removed, deleted, as if it never happened, as if it never existed, as if reality itself had been edited. According to official records, this mission never existed, no crew names were ever released, no documentation was ever filed publicly, no footage was ever shown, no internal acknowledgement, no archived mission logs, no post-mission analysis, no internal memos, no trace in official systems, no evidence that could be verified. Even inside NASA, most people never knew it happened. Entire departments, unaware. Entire teams, uninformed. Engineers, never informed. Analysts, kept in the dark. Technicians, given partial data. Everyone saw fragments, but no one saw the full picture. And yet, there are those who believe it did, not because of rumors, not because of conspiracy theories, but because of what was left behind. Fragments, signals, gaps in history that showed unity exist, moments where data simply disappears, moments where records stop and never continue, moments where information begins, but never ends. In those gaps, don't they make sense unless something is missing, something removed, something intentionally erased, something that someone didn't want to be found. And when those fragments are connected, carefully, slowly, obsessively, they begin to form a pattern, a disturbing one, a pattern that doesn't belong in official history. They point to something impossible, a mission that should not exist, a mission that cannot exist, unless everything we know is incomplete, unless the truth was never fully told, a name that should never have been spoken. Apollo 21. History tells us the Apollo program ended with Apollo 17. That was the final mission. The last time humans walked on the moon. The final chapter of one of humanity's greatest achievements. The end of an era. 12 astronauts in total. They explored. They collected samples. They planted flags. They conducted experiments. They mapped the surface. They documented everything. They left footprints that would remain untouched for millions of years, marks that time itself would struggle to erase. And then, they came home, safely, predictably, completely. No anomalies, no mysteries, no unanswered questions. That was the end, or at least, that's what we were told, that's what was written, that's what was accepted, that's what became history. But years later, small inconsistencies began to appear. Tiny details, almost invisible, at first, barely noticeable, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss, a missing filiere, an unexplained reference there, a document cited, but never found, a mission log referenced, but missing pages, a signal recorded, but never explained, a timestamp that didn't align, a transmission that had no origin, nothing concrete, nothing definitive, nothing that could prove anything. Just enough to make a few people curious. And curiosity has a way of uncovering things that were meant to stay buried. Independent researchers started digging, not for answers, but for patterns, looking for connections, looking for repetition, looking for anything that didn't belong. Astronomers revisited old data, signals once dismissed, reanalyze, noisy, reprocessed, background interference, isolated. Former insiders began speaking in careful, controlled ways, measured words, incomplete sentences, hints, without confirmation, not confirming anything, not revealing details, but also not denying it. In that silence, that careful, deliberate silence, said more than words ever could. because silence can hide muddy truth and speech. Slowly, piece by piece, a pattern began to form, because buried deep within archived transmissions, hidden among layers of noisy interference, there was something unusual, something that didn't belong, something that shouldn't be there. A signal, repeating, precise, consistent, unchanging, perfect, too perfect, not random, not natural, not explainable. At first, NASA classified it as interference, a glitch, background noisy from space, a technical anomaly, something harmless, something explainable, something forgettable, something easy to ignore. But the signal didn't stop. It continued, again, and again, relentless, unchanging, persistent, same frequency, same interval, perfectly timed, perfectly structured, almost mechanical, almost intentional, almost like it was waiting to be noticed. In that case when it became impossible to ignore, because natural signals don't behave like that. They fluctuate, they degrade, they shift, they evolve, they break apart over time. This one didn't. It remained constant, stable, unchanging, unaffected, almost as if it was designed, almost as if it was being sent. NASA began tracking it more closely, not publicly, not openly, quietly, internally, behind closed doors, running simulations, cross-referencing cosmic data, comparing it to known phenomena, pulsars, quasars, radiation bursts, deep space echoes, background cosmic radiation. Nothing matched. No known star, no cosmic event, no natural source. Nothing in the universe behaved like this. Nothing. Weeks turned into months. Analysis turned into concern. Concern turned into urgency. Urgency turned into fear. And then, they found the source. Not deep in space. Not beyond our reach. But much closer. Closer than anyone expected. Closer than anyone was prepared for. The signal was coming from the moon. Specifically, a region near the far side. A place no human had ever explored directly. A place permanently hidden from Earth. A place where no one could see what was really there. A place untouched by observation. Unverified. Unconfirmed. Dark. Silent. Untouched. Or at least, that's what they believed. That's what they assumed. That's what they trusted. In that's when everything changed. Because if something was transmitting from that location, then something had to be there. Something physical, something real, something present, something waiting. Apollo 21 was assembled in complete secrecy. No announcement, no documentation, no visible preparation, no public awareness. A mission built in shadows, designed in silence, executed in secrecy. A crew selected under extreme conditions, not just the best astronauts, but individuals prepared for isolation, uncertainty, in something unknown, something beyond explanation. They were not told everything, only fragments, only what was necessary, only what they needed to complete the mission. Even they didn't know the full truth. To everyone else, it was nothing, another test, another simulation, another routine operation, another day. But it wasn't. This was different. This was something else entirely. Launch day came, in past, without anyone noticing. No broadcast, no headlines, no historic moment shared with the world, no celebration, no recognition, just silence. The rocket left Earth, carrying questions no one was ready to answer, carrying a mission no one would ever admit. The journey to the moon was uneventful, routine, stable, controlled. Everything appeared normal. Everything felt predictable. Everything followed expectations. Until it didn't. Until something changed. Because everything changed. After they landed. Because everything changed. After they landed. At first, it didn't seem like much. No explosions. No alarms. No immediate danger. Just small, subtle irregularities. Tiny inconsistencies that didn't belong. The kind of things you almost ignore, until they start repeating. Their instruments began showing fluctuations, readings that didn't match expectations, magnetic variations, where there should be none, interference in communication systems, not strong enough to block signals, but enough to distort them, enough to create doubt, enough to create tension. At first, it was dismissed, a calibration issue, a sensor misalignment, a minor technical anomaly, something explainable, something fixable. But it didn't stop. It continued, slowly, steadily, becoming harder to ignore. And then came the first visual report. One of the astronauts noticed something, far on the horizon, barely visible, almost blending into the lunar landscape. At first, it looked like nothing, just another formation, another shadow cast across the surface. But something about it felt wrong, not visually obvious, not immediately alarming, but unsettling, too symmetrical, too aligned, too precise. Nature doesn't create perfect lines, nature doesn't create perfect angles, but this looked designed. The astronaut hesitated before speaking, as if unsure of what he was seeing, as if saying it out loud would make it real. They adjusted their position, reoriented the module, activated optical systems, zoomed in, focused, stabilized the image, and what they saw changed everything. It wasn't rock, it wasn't debris, it wasn't a natural formation, it was something else, something structured, something intentional, sharp edges, defined geometry, clear boundaries, standing alone, against the emptiness of the moon. Impossible, completely impossible. Something was there, something that should not exist, something that should not be possible. For a moment, no one spoke, not the crew, not mission control, just silence, heavy, uncomfortable, unnatural. Then the crew made contact, requested instructions, waiting, hoping for explanation, for guidance, for anything that made sense. And again, silence, longer this time, not seconds, but something that felt longer, too long. Then finally, a response, short, controlled, carefully chosen words. Do not approach. No explanation, no context, no reasoning, just a command, cold, direct, final. And that alone was enough to confirm it. Something was wrong, something was being hidden, because if it was nothing, they wouldn't have said anything, but they did, and that changed everything. But curiosity is stronger than orders, stronger than protocol, stronger than fear. In that moment, curiosity won. They moved closer, slowly, carefully, each step measured, each movement deliberate, the lunar dust rising beneath their boots, marking a path toward something unknown, toward something impossible. The structure grew larger, more detailed, more defined, more real, and with every step, the feeling grew stronger, that something was not right, that something was watching, that something was aware. The closer they got, the more unnatural it became. It didn't blend into the environment, it stood apart from it, like it didn't belong there, like it had been placed, not formed, not created by nature, but built, constructed, designed, and then abandoned. Or maybe, not abandoned, maybe waiting for something, waiting for someone, waiting for them. Its surface was unlike anything they had ever seen, not metallic, not stone, not reflective in any normal way. Light didn't behave correctly on it. It bent, distorted, as if the material itself didn't follow the same rules, as if it didn't belong to this world, or this reality. One of the astronauts reached out, slowly, hesitantly, as if instinct itself was warning him to stop. And then, something moved, not around it, not behind it, but within it. Or maybe, around them. He froze, completely. His breathing changed, short, sharp, uneven. He tried to speak, but paused, as if unsure how to describe what he was seeing. He called it a shadow, but not a normal shadow, not one cast by light. This one moved on its own, independent, detached, alive. It shifted, slowly, unnaturally, like it wasn't bound by physics, like it wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, it was there, watching, observing, reacting. The transmission began to distort. Static filled the channel. Voices overlapped, words became fragments, fragments became noisy, confusion turned into tension, tension turned into fear, real fear, not theoretical, not controlled, raw, immediate, unfiltered. One of them said something, something critical, something important, something that was never fully recovered. Only fragments remain, broken, distorted, incomplete. Ichi not alone. And then, everything stopped. No signal, no áudio, no data, nothing. Complete silence, not fading, not weakening, gone, as if it had been catch, removed, erased, back on earth. Everything changed. Panic, immediate, controlled, but undeniable. Attempts to re-establish contact began instantly. Again, again, again. Every channel, every frequency, every system. Nothing. No response, no signal, no trace. Minutes passed, but they felt longer, much longer, until suddenly, without warning, the signal returned, abruptly, unnaturally, like it had never left. But something was wrong, very wrong. The voice that came through was not the same. Flat, empty, emotionless, stripped of identity, stripped of humanity, as if whatever was speaking was no longer fully human. Or maybe, not human at all. It didn't respond to questions. It didn't acknowledge commands. It didn't react. It just repeated one phrase, over and over. Do not send anyone else. Again, again, again. No variation, no hesitation, no emotion, just repetition. Perfect, mechanical, unnatural, as if it was being transmitted, not spoken. And then, without warning, it stopped, completely. The signal catch, permanently. No fade, no distortion, just gone. Apollo 21 was never heard from again. Apollo 21 was never heard from again. No rescue mission was launched. No public concern was raised. No explanation was ever given. Nothing, just silence. A silence so complete. It felt intentional, because this wasn't the confusion. This wasn't the uncertainty. This was control. Back on Earth, everything changed overnight. Not publicly, not visibly, but internally. Something shifted. Protocols were altered. Access was restricted. Entire sections of data disappeared. Files were sealed. Records were rewritten. Mentions of anomalies removed. Anything connected to the signal, till the mission, till the event, was erased. Not archived, not hidden, erased, as if it had never existed, as if it had never happened. And the few who knew said nothing, because whatever happened on the moon was not something meant to be explained. It was something meant to be forgotten. Years passed, then decades. Slowly, the world moved on. The moon became quiet again. No more missions, no more attempts, no urgency to return, no curiosity strong enough to go back, as if something had changed, as if something had been learned, something final, something irreversible, because history doesn't just stop like that, not without a reason, not without a cause. And yet, it did. But the most disturbing part was never the mission itself. It wasn't the structure. It wasn't the shadow. It wasn't even the final transmission. It was what came after, because according to one final, unverified, but persistent report, something else happened, something that was never meant to be known. Days after Apollo 21 went silent, a signal was received on Earth, not from deep space, not from another galaxy, from somewhere, much closer. Same frequency, same pattern, same structure, but stronger, clearer, closer, too close. At first, it was dismissed, a reflection, an echo, residual interference, something left behind, but it wasn't it, because the signal wasn't fading, it wasn't weakening, it was stabilizing, locking in, almost as if it had found a new source, a new origin, a new point of transmission. And then, something changed. The pattern shifted, slightly, just enough to be noticed, because for the first time, it wasn't just repeating, it was adapting, responding, as if it was no longer just a signal, as if it was something else, something aware, something learning, something present. Internal reports suggest the signal was traced, not till the moon, not to orbit, but to Earth, somewhere on Earth. No exact location, no confirmed origin, just a conclusion that was never publicly acknowledged. Each was Eddie. Whatever they encountered, whatever they found, whatever responded, was no longer there. Each was Eddie. In that issue when everything makes sense. Why the mission was erased? Why no one returned till the moon? Why the data disappeared? Why the silence remained? Because each wasn't about hiding what they found. Each was about hiding what followed them back. Because if something did return, if something magic from there, till Eddie, then this was never just a mission. Each was contact, unplanned, uncontrolled, uncontained, and maybe, never meant to happen. Which brings us to the question, no one can answer. If Apollo VTU never existed, if the mission was erased, if the crew was never acknowledged, then who sent the final transmission? And more importantly, what is still transmitting now? Because signals don't just continue without a source. They don't adapt without intention. They don't move without direction. So if each is still active, if each is still repeating, if each is still Eddie, then maybe each was never a warning. Maybe each was never a discovery. Maybe each was an invitation. Or worse, a response. If that is true, then one final question remains. Not about the moon, not about NASA, not about Apollo VTU, but about us. Because if something came back, if something is already Eddie, if something is still watching, is still learning, is still waiting, then maybe the mission didn't fail. Maybe it succeeded. And if it did, then we were never alone, and we never will be again.